step forward.
Yo, Then Now Podcast back, another episode. I'm your co-host C Diesel. To the left of me I have Lelouch V. To the right of me I have Professor E, King of the Comics, Ethan Murphy. How y'all doing, brothers?
Pretty good. Getting together to talk about one of my all-time favorite movies. So,
I did. Spoiler alert! I did not know that was okay.
I had no idea either.
I didn't know that either. Okay.
So this is an impromptu review that we decided to do. Long story short, I had a class, which is kind of a weird one. It's more so
one eternity later.
Yeah.
But we ended up with Se7en.
Pause.
A movie starring Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt. I think Gwyneth Paltrow was a big part of it as well. Sadly enough, Kevin Spacey. I was like, wow, he really was good before he fucked it all up. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's the tragedy. Yeah.
Oh man. But
we'll get into all of that. We're getting all that. We're gonna get into all that.
But yeah, I love the movie. Obviously, when I was like,
so this movie was even. This is off the top for this because we were just a full like.
Oh, this is off the cuff. I'm just giving like my initial because I'm kind of like talking about it and how I wrote it, but I had to write a paper on it as well. And first and foremost, I kind of approached the star power that's in it and the actors in it. Morgan Freeman did this motherfucking thing. He showed why he is Morgan Freeman in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen many movies when he was like I think I'd say he's the lead in this one personally, but I haven't seen too many Morgan Freeman leading movies. You probably have because y'all have been around since Jesus and them, so y'all probably know more.
Jesus
I have. Otis wasn't around then. It was, but when God said let there be time, I said finally. But yeah, Morgan Freeman, of course, is always a G. Have you seen Shawshank yet, Dev?
I haven't yet. That's on my list.
So many. So that's a whole new series. As you see, Otis.
So we're going into the then for then and now. Okay.
We're going to the then. This actually is the then. That's what we're doing. This. Long story short, we're doing this because Charlie hasn't seen a lot of actually really good movies, and we got to get him caught up on some actual classic stuff. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we gotta visit Sidney Poitier next. We gotta get into Otis's.
That's really old. Yeah, you can real old school then.
Sidney Poitier.
Yeah, that's back in the day. But he's got some G's. He's got some real good bangers too. He's got a bunch of like what? But he's got some bangers though too.
But it's just something we're planning on doing. I do want to get into some really old movies. At some point, I really want to do a Kurosawa movie just because that was a big.
Kurosawa.
Yeah, Akira Kurosawa.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe like I don't know. Maybe like was it not Three Samurai. It was fucking
Seven
something Fortress or something like that.
Yeah.
I think one of the Star Wars movies. Yeah, but yeah, that's for a later date. We'll get into those later on.
Are you talking about you're not talking about the Ghibli movies, are you?
No. Yeah, like the original Akira Kurosawa movies that came out in like the 30s and 40s, possibly?
No.
Oh, okay. You gotta go that far back?
I don't know.
It's a 50. He came out in the 50s and he did movies until the 80s.
Okay, so I was a decade off. My bad.
We'll get into it. But this particular review, if you're still here, I'd be surprised if you are. But this one is about Se7en, which came out in 1997, I believe, right, Otis?
It said it was 95 in
95
on HBO.
95. Okay, 95. What's on HBO right now? Yo.
Yeah, that's why I watched it. It's on HBO Max.
I'm watching that tonight.
Yeah, it's 1995. Yeah.
1995. But yeah, so this flick, to put things into perspective, to show you how old I am. This movie. Y'all know I'm a hardcore buddy cop fan, aficionado, if you were. I like buddy cops as much as I like actual real beef and hamburgers. God damn it! But back in the day when my mom used to love watching police procedurals, and she rented this movie. She rented it, and I didn't know what it was about or anything. And back when Blockbuster still existed, we sat down, put the movie in the VHS, and just went to town watching it. And I was like, "What?" Because it was so different. It's not really buddy cop type of stuff at all. It happened to be two cops together, but it's not. But it's a hardcore drama / suspense / almost nightmarish horror almost kind of thing. It's a very different vibe. So I was kind of caught off guard. And in 1995, you can believe it, Dev, I was a young teenager. I was only like 14. Yeah, my balls had been gone. So I was like, I don't know if I even like this thing. It kind of messed me up, and so. It wasn't until years later, right, when I went back and rewatched it later on, where I actually was like, oh my gosh, yeah, this actually is a good movie. It has a good story. I've analyzed it multiple times for the writing and everything else. I'm a big fan of David Fincher. So, yeah.
Otis, you can talk about it back in the day.
For me, when it first came out, I remember when my parents went to go see it, and my dad came back raving about it, so I wanted to see the movie immediately. And my dad was like, "No, not for you."
So last now.
So I mean, he ended up getting the movie in the house, and like I would always try to like sneak and get it when they not around to see it, but he was just always that movie just couldn't get to it. And then eventually the Full Metal Alchemist came out, and my dad would watch a few episodes with me. He was like, "Oh, this is kind of like Seven," when he saw the homunculi.
Okay. That's like, how did you make those two? Okay,
yeah. You say like Seven, so like that's like you're gonna finally let me watch it then, so I can understand what you're talking about. So like, you know what, son, go ahead. So I think that was like a whole like 6-7 plus years later.
After all that waiting,
right?
Yeah, but finally got to see it, and then getting to see exactly how dark a police story can get. Like, I mean, of course, it's a highly exaggerated version of it, but oh my god, like, I don't know. Like, I've always been enthralled by the darker stories like that. When you have someone that can go that dark and create scenarios like that, like that's Hannibal Lecter-ish. Like, that's
Sure. Right. And let's get into the acting for the first part. I kind of just follow the format I did in the paper. When it comes to the acting, and you talk about the Hannibal Lecter thing. Oh god. Kevin Spacey's character, like when he first arrived in that police station, I really got Hannibal Lecter vibe from him. I don't know if did Silence of the Lamb come out before this movie?
I believe so, right? It was like 92, I believe.
Yeah, I could easily see the director kind of basing his aesthetic off of Hannibal Lecter in that movie, because they look very similar with the haircuts, and Kevin Spacey kind of looks like that guy to me to an extent. They kind of like me. I don't know if it's the haircut and outfit.
It's the haircut, yeah. The personalities are very different though, but
yeah, just him aesthetically, they look similar to me. Yeah. As far as that's my first thought process, but they did that very well. I love the exchanges between Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt. Granted, I did think there were moments in where Brad Pitt was kind of doing too much. I was
I know what you mean. Yeah, I think part of it is
pretty early in Brad's career, so he didn't have like a handle on it yet.
Because also he was, it's very early in his career. I think he did like Thelma and Louise. I'm trying to think any of the big things besides that. Which one?
Fight Club.
No, I don't think he did Fight Club yet, because Fight Club he did. I believe he did Fight Club. I was in college when Fight Club came out.
Oh, okay. Really?
So I think that was the second Fincher film.
Yeah, Fight Club came out in '99, like 4 years later.
Yeah. Okay. But yes, but part of what it is too is he's meant to offset. It is the one buddy cop thing there is. He's meant to offset Somerset. Somerset is a very weathered, like literally a week from retirement, cliche type of guy. Getting ready to like this kind of. His name is obviously Somerset. He's kind of retired. And his son's gonna sit. What do you say?
I said hashtag I'm too old for this shit.
But literally. He doesn't say those lines, but it's very much the epitome of that. And then Mills, Brad Pitt's character, is meant to be the exact opposite. So he's meant to be like, I'm much more higher and ready to go, full of piss and vinegar than old school Morgan Freeman. So he kind of played with
they did a darker version of Riggs and Murtaugh, or Riggs and Murtaugh is a lighter version of them. Like which one do you think?
Yeah. It's probably, I guess, weird to say, because it feels like this Murtaugh, if we're going with that analogy or that metaphor, right? This Murtaugh is definitely darker, and because he's also a lot more jaded than actual Danny Glover is, and this Riggs is actually a lot happier. This is Riggs. This is pre-Riggs, because Riggs, remember in the movies, the first one, spoiler alert, his wife's already dead. This is Riggs when his wife is still alive, essentially. So it's kind of a weird. This is Murtaugh further on down the path.
They show how he became Riggs. There you go.
So we figured out. We figured out 7 is the prequel to Lethal Weapon 1. There we go. Good night, everybody. Have a wonderful time. Eat burgers with meat. Meat sure the burgers have
long
meat
stories,
in them.
goddammit. We got to it. But, a big point that I kind of analogy I made within my paper that I really thought applied to this movie was the aspect of the one character. Like they try to make it very apparent in the movie to show you that the environment you're in is pretty evil in a sense. Like they make you at least this the city. I can't. Was there a name of the exact city they were in?
They do not. They do.
So
not.
they
I
don't
think the
mention
script has it, but it's like it's almost it's meant to be called the city. It's meant to be. It's that much more morose if it's the idea of any city could be this way.
Right. And in the way that I don't know if it's the director or just the writer, they paint the city to be something almost akin to like you give it a nihilistic perspective of it to where it corrupts people, it's shitty, and you have this cop that was probably like Mills initially, but over time, and he's been there for so long, his light got kind of snuffed out by the darkness within the city. So you have this pessimistic cop who's just ready to be done. He meets this young guy who he's a shining light that wants to kind of illuminate the darkness in the city, and he kind of like rekindles the light within Morgan Freeman's character. And you kind of like throughout the movie you kind of see, granted they're getting worn down, but you slowly see Morgan Freeman starting to kind of rekindle some of the passion he had for his job initially, while on the opposite end you see Brad Pitt kind of is like kind of dwindling a little bit more and just letting stuff get to him.
Well,
but
of course,
that was like the big thing I noticed and kind of the metaphor I made as far as like they're in this darkness that's trying to snuff out the light of people that live here. And I thought that was really well done as far as presenting an idea. And you see even more so at the end with I think the ending quote I forgot whose quote it was Shakespeare, I believe, but
the Hemingway quote.
Hemingway, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Pretty much saying that the world's evil, but it's still worth fighting for.
Yeah. The originally, and I know we're a little all over the place, but basically that quote, in the original cut of the movie, it was just the first part. It was just the world is a good place and worth fighting for. Originally, it's just the world is a good place, and Morgan Freeman's like, I don't agree, basically. And they said we can't have something that dark. You have to have some way to make it a little more light. So they added the and worth fighting for. And Morgan Freeman says, I agree with the second part. So it was even the ending itself was darker, if possible. Originally.
Thanks for clearing that up, because I was trying to remember that fucking. I just watched this shit yesterday and could not remember this fucking quote.
I'm old.
Yeah.
But one thing also going back to what you were saying there, Dev, as far as the metaphors and about being the light. Of course, I'm sure you noticed that Brad Pitt has big bright blonde hair running around. He stands out in this movie. There aren't that many people with his shade of blonde hair. He stands out everywhere he goes. And also Gwyneth Paltrow looks almost like quote unquote pure. Like she's a blonde haired, long blonde hair, white girl running around. She's meant to represent basically the idea of purity in a sense. So the whole idea is when she gets, spoiler alert, super duper snuffed out, it's like, oh, there is no, this world is literally nihilism personified.
Oh, that's what you was saying?
You know what I'm saying? It kind of mirrors one of E's favorite anime arcs in the Chimera arc for Gon. You really get to see this bright-eyed guy go into full demon time mode. I mean, and it was poetically done because there was no other option. Like, and with how they built up the story, with how you saw his relationship with Gwyneth Paltrow, there was no other option at that end but to complete his full collection of sins.
Yes, he called it. And we definitely, I don't want to rush ahead to the end. We will expand. We have to have a real conversation about the end all around. But
I'm saving the best part for last on that one. I kind of just wanted to break this down piece by piece to make sure we hit everything with it, because it's again this older movie that we probably won't. I don't see ourselves coming back to it too often, if at all. Another thing, symbolism. This movie did an amazing job at symbolism to me in regards to them bringing forth a lot of reference points, like the Divine Comedy, Dante's Inferno. They use a lot of these literary pieces that some of them they kind of dive into as far as the meaning and stuff. They kind of give you information of the plot going forward, like with the Dante's Inferno one and the Divine Comedy, kind of taking you through the 7 levels of hell. But there are like other books by other authors there that if you look up what they are and what they mean, like it gives you room to look up things on your own. And the imagery there, and a lot of it has a lot of foreshadowing to it, especially going through the 7 levels of hell.
Yeah,
it was amazing to me how that all like paid off, especially at the end, which I know they're thirsty to get to, but
right, no. But this is your jam. This is your bag. You like one of your favorite shows now is Evil. Like you really do enjoy shows that deal with it's kind of a category or genre, Bible fiction, so to speak. One of the biggest fictions in the Bible that most people think about, the 7 deadly sins technically doesn't exist. It doesn't actually exist. If you try to look up the 7 deadly sins in the Bible, it's not there. It is something that we all commonly know, or we don't even know what the 7 are, but there actually is no part of the Bible that says these are the 7 deadly sins. It's not real. It's something that we just accept as part of a fiction in a sense. But it works. It's fun. It's enjoyable. I completely get it. I love it too. So yeah.
I think they only arose when I think it came. I could be wrong, but with the 4 horsemen in the, I don't know if it's the book Eli. What book of it's one of those books that were kind of taken out as far as like the Revelation and the Apocalypse, with like the horsemen coming around and them describing what the horsemen look like and all the other wild shit. But yeah, it was
good stuff they let it together. Yeah.
Oh yeah, or how angels actually look. That shit's crazy as well. But yeah, that's a whole bunch of other shit. This movie did a lot of that, like the little things were done really well. Sound design. The thing that I really, really admired that was done really well was there was a sound cue that was introduced early in the movie of Morgan Freeman of a metronome going off. Like he would sleep to the sound of a metronome. And at least the way I perceived that was his way of kind of silencing the outside noise and focusing some so he could kind of get some sense of peace and rest so he could sleep. And then you see the case as it goes on throughout the movie. It's slowly unhinging Mills and what was Morgan Freeman's character's name?
Somerset,
yeah.
It's a pretty little name,
yeah. Somerset and Mills, like you just saw them both become unhinged. With Mills, he was just becoming more erratic, and Mills, he was just not Mills, but Somerset was just he wasn't able to focus himself as much. And you saw that
he's became more obsessed. Yeah,
right.
He was losing sleep. He couldn't, and he was. They may cut you off. I'm sorry, but I love that to try to get sleep, or to calm his mind, he take out a switchblade knife and throw it at a dartboard. It's like, God damn, dude, that's hardcore. That's hardcore.
The thing I got from it though was like the thing that was used to help him get rest before. Later in that movie, that became something that stopped him from sleeping because now he couldn't really focus anymore. So it went from something that was an aid to him to something that he just hated, and he just broke that shit up against the wall and then tried to find sleep some other way or find some kind of peace of mind through, like you said, through the throwing of the knife. I just thought that was really well done, just to introduce this thing and then give it 2 meanings by the end of the movie. Was really well done and really well executed.
Well, also, like you said, it represents, what metronomes are supposed to, of course, represent in lots of ways in life in general is stability, is peace. Mm-hmm. This is kind of a constant. It always will have the exact same, it will keep the time stable in a sense. And it's meant to show the breakdown of his mind and the stability, the peace, like you were saying, is breaking down to the point where he literally throws it across the room and breaks it. It actually breaks, showing how his peace of mind is gone. He's no longer there like he once was. There's a very little symbolism there. But yeah, it's great. It's fantastic. But also you mentioned the sound effect, the sound design. Keep in mind that this city, I forget that, I think it's like 7 days total. That's part of it also, it's 7. The first 6 days, it's raining nonstop. You're hearing water all the time, sometimes heavy, sometimes light. I'm sorry, I just meant to cut you off.
I was ready to get that shit off. You just like
I wanted to speak on that, but
you can. I was just gonna say the rain is a big character in the way it sounds, but you can go
elaborate, ahead. Please.
I was just gonna say that that the way that the tone of this movie was built up in so many different ways, and you finally get to the 7th day where it is now the bright and sunny day, and you think that they're at the end of the tunnel there, and it's the worst day possible. Like it's beautifully done. Like this movie is a masterclass on how to have multiple arcs play out within a short span. Like there are a whole series that don't show this level of progression between characters. Like seeing where everyone starts right at the beginning of this movie and seeing how it ends. Like it's one of the reasons why I grade things as difficult as high as I do. It's one of the movies that like set the bar for me.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, yeah, I agree that it does. Like I said, I've analyzed it multiple times for film. I had 2 different film classes that we had to analyze this movie for two different reasons, and I go back to it all the time as far as analyzing how to write scripts and how to actually do conflict without violence or action essentially. So yeah, it is a masterclass. But one thing that's amazing, of course, is how, if you notice, on that 7th day, that's when John Doe, Kevin Spacey's character, shows up. It's almost like he's the light bringer in a way. It's like, that's bizarre for him to be the light bringer, because we do see him earlier, but he's got a hat on and a trench coat. But later on, when he shows up there playing his day, it's like, Why are you bringing the light? That makes what is going on here? It's a weird subversion of expectations in a bizarre sense. You'd expect Mills to be the one, the light bringer, but no, he's actually, in a sense, he's death. That's his whole point. Mills is meant to represent death and wrath. He is literally wrath by the end of the movie. So the symbolism is fantastic, but it's you have to be paying attention and really look for it in a sense.
Right. And again, we've talked to an exhausting amount as far as the symbolism goes. The messaging in this movie is something that I really admire. I always admire in a movie in which the movie is trying to get, to me, all movies need to be giving some message across, rather than some story. It doesn't always need to be the most complicated message, but like, what message are you trying to deliver to me, rather that's protagonist growing to do something else or whatever it is. And we kind of harped on it before earlier, as far as the message of the world can be a really bad place, but don't lose hope and keep fighting for a better tomorrow, is essentially the message I got from this movie. And I really, it feels like when they, in the process of creating this thing, like the message was the first thing they made, because everything around the movie that surrounds that that thought process, as far as, like you guys said, them having the water being there the whole time and it always being dark, and the color metrics of the movie always being really dark and grainy, and then the last part being the better day but still being the worst day, like Oda said earlier. All these things centralize that one message to me, and I think it's just, I don't know if I'd be interested to talk to the writer to see if that's what his process of writing it was, or how his foundation for it. It feels like everything revolves around that one message, and it was done beautifully.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I do think, oftentimes, I'm sure Otis can attest to this as well, when you come up with a story, you don't necessarily think of the theme. The theme kind of comes to you as you're going along. You may have a message or in mind, but the actual themes reveal themselves to you. The story talks to you. And with this one, it very much seems like the arc that Mills is going on is Mills is confronting what true evil and nihilism looks like in a way he never had to before. And Somerset is confronting the idea that hope is a necessity. He had pretty much abandoned it. He's like, I'm jaded. There's no point in doing this stuff. And by the end of the movie, his last line is, "I'll be around. I'll be around." So kind of the idea of, he's not saying I'm gone. He's saying like, yeah, regardless of how insanely fucked up this world is, there's clearly a need for people like me in it. Regardless of whether we will actually win the day, doesn't matter. We have to fight it. That's kind of how I see it. Essentially, is the movie trying to tell you that it's not that the evil has won and there's no point? No, I don't think it is. I think it's telling you that there's a lot of it out there, but it is worth fighting. Essentially.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's one of the beautiful things about this movie, is that it is so subjective and you can get so many different things from it. Because I got a lot. So one, pick your battles, because if at any point in time they could have backed off this case and he wouldn't have gotten on their trail, meaning his Mills's wife would still be alive. So that's one thing. It's like, if you're a regular beat cop with no type of protection in line for something like that, and you see how horrible these things that he's doing to other people are, do you really want to get on his radar? It's just being real. And then two, man, the world is a fucked up place, and you don't always get what you want in the end. Yeah. That's the other message I got from it, just because you see how it ends. In a regular cop sense, they followed their case through all the way in the way that you're supposed to, right? And they didn't do anything outside of the law, outside of usual procedural, essentially, and it still ended how it did.
Mm-hmm. The three words that ring to me in that process is "at what cost." You got the criminal, you ended the whole spree, but what did you sacrifice to do that thing?
Right. Because here's the thing, you're saying they caught the criminal. They didn't catch him. He caught himself. He turned himself in.
He turned himself in, yeah.
Because he had finished his work, essentially. So kind of it's one of those things with Indiana Jones, they always say, did Indiana Jones affect any of the movies he's in ultimately? Not really. Everything still played out the way, regardless of his intervention. With this movie, if Mills and Somerset hadn't shown up, what did they actually prevent from happening? Nothing. Did they change anything? No. So that's one thing too.
And that's another thing that I wrote in my paper in regards to that, as far as the movie itself giving you this sense of dread and inevitability throughout it.
Right.
Like, they're not being proactive about preventing any murders. It's always them being reactive to everything that's going on. It's him giving them trails to, even up until the point of like he laid fingerprints out and help, and that led them to go to place, where it's like it makes the audience feel, it makes the characters feel as helpless as the audience is. Like, we're having to watch things happen and there's nothing we can do about it.
Yes, exactly. I couldn't agree more.
And that's an amazing part of it.
But it's also fun because there is one time where they have him. When they go to his apartment, and they could have, if they had gone literally like a minute later, he'd have been in there with his groceries, and they could have caught him. And because it's just the way fate played out, he was right behind them essentially. So he actually not only did they not catch him, he saw them and actually knows about them, that they're on his trail essentially. But the best part about that is, it's clearly that's the one moment in the film where there's actual whole chase scene. It's like 5 minutes long. It's amazing, but it's like the movie was supposed to almost play out an entirely different way, but because they interrupted it, it's a whole chaos happens. Chaos ensues in a sense. So it's a very deliberate thing that Fincher and them did, as far as like, it's almost like this wasn't supposed to happen in the movie, and now everything has to kind of get thrown at a whack because of it.
Yeah, what is that? That law in science, just the observation of something changes the outcome.
Exactly. Yeah, I forgot the specific term, but yes, just literally observing, which is the whole idea of a watch pot never boils kind of thing. But yeah, it's true. It is very true as far as because they stepped up, because like you said, intervened, or because they were observing, it did speed up. Like you said, it sped up his timeline, but it didn't change it or alter it.
And speaking on him again, getting into the villain, on the Then and Now podcast, we've very apparently many times talked about how villains make a really good movie to us. At least if I'm going off my memory, so if my memory serves me correctly, I think that's one of the bigger approaches with like stuff like the MCU as the villains. This villain in particular was very interesting to me, because watching the movie throughout it, I was trying to figure out at what point are we going, like, it felt random. Like, the movie felt like there wasn't, usually the killer, you would assume in a movie like this that the killer would be connected to the detectives in some sense, whether it be through some grudge or they know each other some way. It's just really just, again, going back to my paper again, it felt like that the darkness of the city had a physical embodiment, and that was the villain in this movie. Like, he represented the evil of the city in a sense. It was random, it was sporadic, and it didn't really have any intent outside of delivering what it perceived to be justice.
100% agree. Your paper is A+ in my book, because he is meant to. I'm sorry, Otis, I keep on talking, but I'll be quick. The idea basically is his name is John Doe. He has no fingerprints. He's meant to represent humanity. This the doldrums of humanity's soul, how dark it actually is. That's it. I also have his victims in and of themselves are random too. He doesn't have beef with these people. He just chose them at random. So it's almost meant to show just how true evil doesn't give a fuck. Chance isn't particular. The world can just be a mess in and of itself, and that's it. And that's kind of his whole ethos. That's the breakdown of it essentially. He's trying to reveal that to people, to get the world to see it the same way the Joker does it in a sense too. To go on the opposite end of the spectrum. I'm sorry, Otis. I'll be short. I promise.
You're okay, brother. It's okay.
But with Rey, y'all remember Rey in episode, was it 8 or so of Star Wars, where the whole idea is that she's nobody from nowhere.
Right.
But because she chooses to live the life she does, she's able to use the Force and that kind of stuff. That's the Rey I think of in my head canon. She's nobody from nowhere. It's the same idea with the evil. Evil can come from anywhere, from anybody, just because it is. It doesn't have to be a destined person that's chosen by the heavens or by hell to do all kinds of. No, it can be anybody, whatever they want to do. So.
All right. We just on it. Otis?
It just keeps going into my point. Like, the world is a fucked up place, and knowing when to pick, when to, pursue a thing and when to let something go. God, what's the old song? Know when to hold them and when to fold them. Let's fold them sometimes. It's okay. Yeah. Like when you see a person with their insides on their outsides and put on display for you, just let it go. It's okay.
At that point, though, I don't know if he would let them. That's one thing I found interesting. You guys, I think Otis thinks it's something that would happen to them either way. Like the movie, to me, or the way I looked at it, it made it seem as though that was fated. Like from that first meeting when he first like took pictures of them in that stairway, like, oh, I have a fascination with these cops now. Not everything I'm doing going forward is going to be about these individuals. Like he created a fascination with Mills specifically. He created that fascination with them, like from that first meeting.
You see, because he takes the pictures of Mills on the stairs with the camera. Because he's like posing as a photographer, a reporter, whatever it is. Yeah. So yeah, he does, and he also mentions it. He said, "I messed up." Right? It does change his plan in some sense because he's like, "I'm envy now. I represent envy." John Doe is saying that. So yeah, there is a slight deviation, but it's still part of the plan. I imagine he still was going to have someone to represent envy, if not himself. So yeah, it does. He did. Because of their involvement, he did, of course, gravitate towards Mills in Somerset. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And another thing about that I found, another thing about this movie that I really enjoy that I think a lot of other movies have difficulty with is consistency in the methodology. His whole methodology was like people suffering from these sins need to be put down because they are like, to him, they were disgusting. Like the fat guy was disgusting. The woman that didn't see her outer beauty or her inner beauty was disgusting to him. So once he realized, oh, I'm envious, I'm the envy now I'm gonna reconstruct my plan to put me out of, like, I have to die too, like I have to be gone. Yeah. And like he was consistent throughout the entire thing up until his death, and I really enjoyed that because I didn't have to ask questions about why would he do that if he thought this, or because whenever, like, that's one of the first things we talk about whenever we're reviewing any movie is the difficulty in consistency within the person's methodology, and like. And all we can do is speculate between the three of us, and then that leads into a whole other tangent. But this one, it didn't leave room for that mistake there. They were really consistent.
Yeah, he wasn't a hypocrite. Like he recognized, he mentioned openly, I'm a victim too. I did this, therefore I deserve punishment. 100%. Yeah. Now, since you brought it up, we have to do this. We'd be remiss if we didn't. What is y'all's favorite, kill that John Doe does?
Gluttony had to be one for me. That was the one.
That one's hard to look at.
Same, because like
I was eating when I was watching that, and I was like,
no, never eat.
I put that shit in the fridge and just like, I get
never eat watching this movie ever in my life.
Yeah, I mean, you just think like that is a set done before Charlie was born, and it looked like that. But then we get some of the movies we get today, and just like. How
we regress?
Just watch old movies. You can.
I don't think it's regression as much as it is the attention to detail. Because we've seen movies in this era that are just as good as that when it comes to set design and things like that. But those obviously are from people that are passionate about. I'm not saying the people working on it, whatever they did were passionate, but I think they just didn't have the same attention to detail that the other passionate people did.
Fair. So yeah, that's fair. I know what you're saying. Obviously, like the guy who did, I forgot the director who did like X and the sequel with the Lamb, and they actually, him and his team, even though they have a lot less money, they clearly put a lot of fucking time and effort into the details for their sets too. Yeah, that's fine. But I think what Otis is also highlighting the idea of like this world seemed very, very real, very, very tacit, very, very lived in. It wasn't trying to pose as like, it's isn't this kind of pristine or isn't this kind of cool? It's like, no, fuck cool. It's like, we want this to look grimy. Let's get really nasty and grimy, get real actual maggots on the camera. It's like, okay, cool, let's go for it. I remember as a kid, the one that, because I saw it when I was 14, and I think this is probably the reason why Otis's dad's like, nah, you ain't watching this movie, is the one for Lust, where the dude, you understand what happened, right? Yeah. You understand what it was. We don't even see it. It's so bad we don't even see anything of it. The whole idea is a man literally has to put on a sharpened strap on and do what he has to do. I can't even describe it too much. We get overwhelmingly demonetized and taken down from this site. It's like, it's that, as a kid hearing that, I was like, what? And my mom said, oh no. I remember, but it's like, that haunts me still. Cause the guy, we just see his after, he was like, he's shaking in the chair when interrogating him. Like, he's like, he made me, it's like that freak out. I can't imagine that would,
because they already they already say a lot of times within police procedurals and this thing, cop lingo in general, like stabbing is the most intimate murder ever, and if like you're doing that, you're feeling every inch, every applied piece of force. Like you can't just disconnect yourself from it because you had to actively like put effort into doing that multiple times. And then that's not a quick death. Like that girl's probably screaming like, yes. God. I was like, yo. And that acting from that guy was perfect. Like he portrayed, like I didn't think it was too much over the top. I thought he portrayed the right amount of trauma there, like from him not being able to speak to him like I've had my own mental breakdown before, and I kind of had a similar thing of when you kind of devolve into only saying like a handful of words because you just can't process anything else besides the situation you're in and what comes to your mind immediately. And he just kept repeating the same word. It was amazing.
If that's shock, that's what shock, a version of shock looks like, where you were just your body, because your mind and body don't know what to do. So it's a version of shock. So I completely agree. I mean, obviously there are plenty of ones. One of the scenarios too, which is similar to Saw. I don't know if James Wan was inspired by this movie at all, but
pound of flesh.
With the pound of flesh, but yeah, the one with the woman who's basically she has a phone in one hand and then she has the pills in the other. And the idea is, or she's already taken the pills. I think the idea is like you can call for help to be saved, but you will be scarred for the rest of your life, or you can just go ahead and take these pills and kill yourself. And she chose the pills to die. And it's like kind of like, I get the idea that of course suicide's horrible. I'm not endorsing suicide, but it's like you didn't really give her a fair choice. Like this is such a horrible scenario. Like what would you do in that? I mean, you've ruined someone's life, and then you say you can call for help, or you can just go ahead and end it. It's such a horrible scenario to be put in too. So it's also just the mind games the movie has.
Yeah. You know? I'm convinced the writers of Saw, like whoever created Saw, took a lot of inspiration from this film because the parallels there. Obviously, we've seen a lot of movies and different shows like use the 7 deadly sins as like a murder template to go off of, but Saw to me was like the closest to this, in which you took that to the extreme of like, all right, like literally your direct things going into it with the pound of flesh thing. There's a whole thing of where these two people have to like cut things off their body to outweigh the other, which was gruesome. But I think that was Saw 2, which is probably like the last excellent Saw movie to me, in my opinion. In which they did that because it was grimy, but it also made sense in the methodology of the character. Like it did, again, like I said, it didn't leave any room for mistake on why he would have them do that.
Well, because that's the whole Jigsaw is there are obviously some parallels between Jigsaw and John Doe as far as because I think Jigsaw is a little more deliberate. I mean, I guess they're both deliberate with their victims to some extent, but Jigsaw chooses people he believes or deems in need of change, and he tries to be the catalyst for that change. John Doe didn't give him that option, but Jigsaw is like, your sentence, for example, doing drugs over and over again, you have to essentially do this to abandon drugs, and this will change your life for the better. It's gonna hurt, but it'll bring you there. They're both in some ways they're zealots for some kind of what they believe to be a higher cause, but it's of course abused and
the main difference between the two is the fact of Jigsaw. He has you go through these trials in the hopes of redemption. Like if you can make it through this life-altering or life-threatening thing, then you've been reborn and your past sins have been washed away. Like he sees himself as a messiah in a sense, versus John Doe, it feels like, oh, you've done this crime, you're irredeemable. I have to put you out of your misery and take you out of this world so it can be a better place.
Right. Yeah. It's just one is they're both judging, but one is you said one is giving them an option for redemption, and one's not.
You have any thoughts on those?
Yeah. I mean, there are definitely some parallels, I guess, in the sense where the things that you said that they both went after victims. I mean, I really don't think they're that similar, honestly. I think the only parallel is the fact that they observe people to a degree. I mean, I don't know. Maybe just me. I don't see a lot of connection between the two. I see how he could gain inspiration from this and kind of evolve to where he is with Jigsaw, but like nothing about their methodology would really seem too similar to me. Exactly what you said. Like Jigsaw was looking to improve people and fix these horrible things, and he was deliberate in stalking his victims. While I feel like with John Doe, he was just like, oh, you did this thing to me at the wrong time. Now you're
right.
next. Like,
yeah. Yeah, it's a bit more random. I mean, obviously he did the victims fit the criteria of a quote unquote deadly sin. Like he chose a guy that was heavy set or fat or what have you. He chose a woman who was a vanity. She was very vain with being a celebrity in some way. Of course, he chose her for pride. But there is that observational factor. But you're right. I think obviously Jigsaw's biggest difference is how he sets up all these elaborate traps and things like that nature. With John Doe, there is no. I'm not trying to give you an option to get out. The point of this is for you to die. That's the point.
All right. And that'd be a dope video in the future to kind of look at the methodology. I've talked about Saw a couple of times on the show, and I love just the methodology of Jigsaw. Like I would love to do like a character study, kind of almost like a point of interest video, but kind of just us like dissecting the methodology of that character a lot. And at that point, it's really just the first two movies because the rest of them don't really involve him at all. It's more people corrupting his methodology.
Right.
But yeah, that'd be a video for a future day. But yeah, one of the critiques, like I'm gonna get into some critiques because we praise this movie to high hell. Nothing too crazy, but as far as the methodology, the one spot where I felt it wasn't necessarily hypocritical, but I kind of didn't like the fact that initially they paint him out throughout that car ride. He's painting himself as this God-chosen Messiah he's supposed to be the right hand of God or whoever he believes to be his higher power in carrying out these things. And he's making it seem as though all the things he's doing are altruistic in a sense, and he's doing it without any self-gain in sight. But then they also further into the car ride, he really gets into pretty heavily of how he wants to be remembered and how he'll be dissected over time, and he's making you guys famous. I felt like that part right there kind of took away from him a little bit because you made him become almost more human and more selfish in that sense of like it felt like he was doing things for fame and he's not necessarily doing it for this methodology that he made up in his head.
I agree, and that's the point. Which there's a part where Somerset kind of calls him out on that. He's like, you were saying one thing, you're talking on both sides of your mouth, brother. And also like he tries to be like, I'm nobody. I'm John Doe. I don't have fingerprints. But at the same time, he does say my work will be remembered forever, type of stuff. And Somerset says you can't be a truly benevolent engine for good and for God if you are that concerned with your reputation and your work afterwards. Like you shouldn't be a factor at all in that type of thing. So Somerset does call him out for that. The
part he got on him for was the part as far as I'm taking delight in the murders. Like he said he was doing them because it was, again, he was chosen. He had to do it. It was his responsibility. And then Somerset got him about, you enjoyed killing these people. You're not doing it out of selflessness. You're doing it because you enjoyed it. And he was like, there was some enjoyment in it, but I kind of had to.
Yeah, he's a hip. He does mess up. Yeah.
If you think about the spectacle in general, like you wouldn't have done this much if you didn't want it to be seen. If you didn't want it to be remembered by people, like you could have just stabbed him and kept going and left a sticky note, and it would have essentially accomplished the same thing. It's the same people. Right. You made these elaborate killings. Like you did this intentionally. You painted these pictures and you left messages to connect people to the next thing. Like you wanted this. This isn't something like, that was this old divine calling and you have to, like, it wasn't God telling them to follow him along the journey. No, it was him giving them notes.
Yeah, it was never. Yeah.
I guess makes sense because if he was truly what he claimed to be, they probably would never find him. Because if he's good enough to like hold a person in one place for an entire year and not leave a single fingerprint behind, I'm like, he's good enough to kill people at random and never leave any trace behind.
Of course,
and he's the one at random, they would never find him. So I guess that makes sense, and I enjoyed that aspect as far as like giving them a feasible way at catching him. But at the same time, one, you didn't really catch him, and then two, it felt, I don't know, maybe it's something in the character that the writer meant to show as far as like the hypocrisy in it. But I found that kind of odd that you claimed all this and did all this for this purpose, but at the end you were being a hypocrite.
Yeah, no, that's fair, and I think that's part of what it is too. I'm sure Otis remembers this from the world of our boy Hannibal. The idea there's a question in Red Dragon where he says like, where Hannibal's like, how did you catch me? Was it because you're just better than me? You're smarter than me? And he's like, and Will Graham's like, no, I'm not smarter than you at all. It's like, the thing is, you're crazy, and crazy makes mistakes. And it's kind of the same thing with John Doe. John Doe may have all his delusions of being chosen by God and doing a higher calling, but in the end, he's still a very egotistical maniac. So of course his ego got the better of him. He walked in there because he wanted everyone to know it was him, that he had to be seen, he had to be discovered. The same thing as the Riddler. And with Batman, how many times is the Riddler? Look, Batman's always like, we'll always catch him because the Riddler wants us to catch him. That's the point. So yeah.
But yeah, I think we've waited. I've held it off long enough, but let's finally get into the box.
Yes.
That scenario.
Yes, I've said that on multiple dates, but I mean in a very different way now.
That's nasty. That was some of the best written thing. I can't explain to you how in awe I was when the final one they started to give you enough information to piece things together and what was going on. Because initially I'm like, why the fuck are they out here? Delivery, what the fuck? Because initially you think the big package that was delivered. Well, to give context, people have already seen the movie probably, so you understand. But in case you haven't, the John Doe, the villain, essentially pays this guy's delivery guy $500 to bring this package to the spot in the middle of the desert where he brought Mills and Somerset at an exact time at 7 o'clock. And this package happened to be the decapitated head of Mills's wife. But obviously, initially, everybody thinks it's a bomb or something kind of weird, and you don't know what it is. And as soon as Somerset opens the box, he puts shit together, and he's like, "Give me the gun." All you hear is him heading towards Mills, like, "Throw it down," or "Give it to me," like, "Don't do it." And he's not telling him what's going on. But as an audience, you're like, "Damn, what the fuck's going on? Why is he going to give the gun?"
Yeah, we don't know either. You gotta remember two quick things. I'll let you go, Dev. One, it was conditional with John Doe turning himself in. He had his lawyer work out a deal where they had to be taken to a specific spot to get the last two bodies or what have you. So they didn't even know where they're going to. That's the beginning of the suspense and the tension for us, the audience, and of course for the characters too. The only one that knows what's going on at this point is John Doe, essentially. And then they do get there, and like you said, Somerset sees what's in the box first, and he's like, "Fuck!" And so at that point, we still don't know Brad Pitt or Mills and the audience. We still don't know what's going on. But yeah,
sure, yeah. Bring the box, and obviously that leads Mills to act how any normal human being would. You put him on a spot in which you make him choose between his morals and his code of ethics that he had as far as being a cop, or just succumbing to the natural human emotion of wrath. So at the end, it was really well done because essentially, like you said, like we said earlier, John Doe made himself the sin of envy, and then he created the sin of wrath, obviously, to finish out the last two out of the chain of seven. And that was just so fucking well done. And you just saw Brad Pitt like trying to fucking like make things make sense in his head. Granted, some of the acting for that, it felt kind of like he did this thing to where like, he was crying, but he was like laughing at the same time in disbelief. But
you know he's laughing?
It looked like he was smiling almost in a sense. It looked kind of off to me. Where like I couldn't tell if he was like in disbelief or if he was, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it looked like he was. It looked like fury mixed with overwhelming sadness to me, because he's like crying and leaning over, and he goes back up. It's anger mixed with fury.
Yeah, I was thinking he can't connect. He was upset for the other stream. But yeah. But besides that, it was just really well done, man. Like it's stuff like this that, like Otis said earlier, it sets a standard of excellence. But at the same time, we've also talked about it in different stuff of like, it's so hard to live up to this bar because they set such a high bar, and it was done so fucking well done.
He's back. Welcome back.
Yeah. But I've read through it enough. I'll let y'all get y'all pieces off as far as what y'all thought about the whole situation.
No, I mean to cut you off. What I was going to ask you though, Dev, was this movie came out obviously 97? 95. My bad. 95. And that is, I'm sure you probably have heard this in pop culture. What's in the box? What's in the box before? Did you know? Did you know at all what was going to happen? Did you go into this movie blind? Essentially,
I went into this movie really blind.
Oh, that's fascinating to me. Okay,
literally,
you're young enough that you missed that kind of spoiler generation. To say, okay,
like literally, I had no idea.
I gotta get ready to hop out of here. I'm just gonna leave it at this movie's at 9.5 out of 10. Almost perfect. I'll break it down in a feature video, I guess. Why tonight? And I'll be back. I gotta go get the other show set up. I apologize, you guys.
Okay.
No, you're good, man.
No worries.
I'm gonna edit the thing anyway, so I'll just cut it out here. I'm gonna try to take my time with this video, try to do our thing with it.
Yeah, let's put some veneer on this one.
Yeah. Plus, I'm gonna send this shit to like my professor for some extra credit shit. I'm just like,
it's extra credits shit stuff.
Yeah, because I missed a lot of fucking class. I ain't gonna lie.
But yeah, so you, I was asking you basically how you went into this. You said you went into this blind. You went into this blind?
Yes, I went into this movie completely blind. Literally, like I was trying to decide what I was gonna watch, and I wanted to do Saw at first. And me and my professor sat down in his office, and he was like, literally typed in Google like cop procedural movies with horror aspects. And then this came up, and he was like, "Oh man, I remember this. You gotta check this out." I was like, "Oh, Morgan Freeman. All right, I'll check it out. Horror, da da da." And I watched it, and I was again, when we got to the opening credits, I'm like, damn, this is gonna be kind of horror. I'm like, all right. I'm excited. Granted Halloween had passed, but I'm still in the spooky mood. I'm down for this shit. And man, I was prepared for it to be kind of mid. I'm not gonna lie to you, but I was very, very, very happily surprised with how wrong I was.
Okay, but I love that because it's a great movie. It's a great movie, undeniably. But I love that you were able to that still exists. You were able to go into this spoiler free, essentially. That the whole box scene hit you the way it did. Mm-hmm. That the ending, because the ending is the biggest payoff of all time, and we talk about setups and payoffs ad nauseum because I'm a horrible asshole that can't stop talking about writing techniques. But the setup throughout the film is we see that Brad Pitt is constantly angry. He's constantly can't control himself. He is living wrath. So at the end, when he does what he does with the gun, it's like, yeah, we're not surprised. And Somerset sees it. He's like, oh yeah, Somerset knows off tops that without a doubt, Brad Pitt Mills will kill this dude. Mm-hmm. And it's like, yeah, so Somerset is trying his best to keep the peace. And Mills, you can see him struggling, trying not to do it because he knows it's going to ruin his life and everything else. But he's like, I can't not be what I am. And it's not going to work. And he does, he puts him down. So it's a beautiful scene because it's just, like you said, it's the inevitable being inevitable.
Right.
Yeah.
I will say though, the only thing for me, not that it doesn't make it age well, with things in media and how cops have been perceived and things have gone on recently in recent history, I saw that and I kind of was like, he'll be all right. He'll be out pretty soon. Like there's in no way I believe like a situation like that happens of where like this cop is forced to kill this murderer, this serial murderer that's been terrorizing the city, and they don't just get him off immediately off that. Or he's just
you hear the line that the chief says. I guess it's the chief. He says, "We'll take care of him." He literally said that line as he's being driven away. Now, it's up to interpretation what he actually means, but he literally says, "quote We'll take care of him."
Yeah, there's no way he doesn't get off on that.
Yeah,
but I think it more so just will fuck up Mills. And
his life is over. There's no.
Yeah,
he's not getting over that. He's never getting over that. His pregnant ass wife is gone. He's destroyed.
Yeah, that was another subtle plot point that I wanted to speak on really quickly before we close out is the pregnancy thing. They like that whole scene of Morgan Freeman discussing the pregnancy with her. I was fully expecting for them to do the whole wise sage thing where he just knew all the right answers, knew everything to say to make everything better for her. But for the fact that he just didn't know, he could give her one of his experiences with a similar situation, and he told her what to do at the end, but the fact he just did not know how to handle it immediately was so human to me. Especially with somebody being that old and being in that experience, she assumed he would have all the answers as well, and I think the audience did it as well as also. But that was just really well done to me. And then seeing that payout because I totally forgot about the pregnant thing until it came back up until the very end where it was I think that was like the push over the edge that Mills had to make him kill him.
Yeah,
I think he could have fought it beforehand, but that
he made just beating the shit out of him for a while, but then he found out. I agree. It was also because it's fun too that Somerset, after all this, is keeping his cool until John Doe reveals that she was pregnant. And you see him backhand him. He goes, "Shut up!" He backhands him, kind of like, "That's too much. You went too far." Because also, what he could have done, John Doe could have killed his wife, pregnant ass wife, but not revealed that she was pregnant. Mills never needed to know that she was pregnant. So it was harsh. But I love the idea too that we want to possibly think of Somerset as being somewhat of not a saint, but being kind of more lawful good in a sense. But he's like, yeah, I over time, he's like, my girlfriend got pregnant, and over time, she wanted to have the baby, and I didn't. And over time, I convinced her. It's kind of like, damn. It's like you talk to the world is so dark that you convinced your girlfriend to have an abortion to avoid bringing a child into the world. It's like that is about as dark as it gets.
All right, but yeah, all in all, I think Otis gave his rating before he pieced out of 9.5. What are you giving it?
I would give it a 9.5 as well. But before you give your total, before you give your score, my friend, I do have to ask you a question because you are a young aspiring filmmaker or a storyteller, artist yourself, creator. What do you think? Do you think there was any symbolism with the whole train, them being Mills and his wife living near a train? The constant rumbling near their apartment. Do you think there's any symbolism with that?
I think that train served as their metronome that Somerset had, in a sense of where, granted, it wasn't something that focused them, but I think it served as something that would not let these pure people have any peace within the city. It was like the city's way of disrupting their life even further and like kind of corrupting them more. Because what do you do whenever you're not allowed to sleep or not allowed to rest or something's annoying you? It slowly makes you angrier and more unhinged the more and more it goes on until you snap at something. To me, that's what that represented in that part of the movie of they'd get peace slowly or like trying to sleep and then that would come through and then they just be irritated about it. Because initially you see it like they were irritated by it, but they did hate it at first. But I think if it would have kept, it was like the city's way of doing that.
I agree. It is literally, that's the analogous, that's their metronome. I completely agree. Well stated. Okay, so yeah, I said 9.5. What you got, Brady?
I'm giving it a 9.5 as well. I think again, like I thought it would have been perfect if they didn't add in that part as far as him wanting it, seeking attention. I think that although that worked and it wasn't a plot hole in any way to me, I felt like it would have been so much more impactful if that wasn't there. And then he just died at the end. Like everything went according to plan. He had his methodology and his methodology was consistent all the way into his own death. And then he's pretty much, you lost. Like Mills and Somerset lost, essentially. He did everything he wanted to do in all those 7 days, and all 7 sins were carried out. And I think that would have been really, I think whenever the villain wins in a movie, it hits you really hard, hard.
It does. And he definitely won. He got everything he wanted. The only half a point I would take off is just that it seemed a little convenient that the police would allow John Doe to drive them or to take them all the way out to the middle of nowhere to do this, to set up this thing. And also the timing, the specific timing, he was able to, of course, he must have jumped in there at the exact moment after Brad Pitt left to go to work. Because you see, he leaves in the morning, he leaves to go to work, and you see it's with his wife. And so John Doe must have said, I'm going to go, because it's still the morning. Mills and Somerset are walking into the office at the beginning of the morning. He must have found the exact window to jump in there, very narrow window, get in there, kill his wife, get her head, set up all that kind of stuff and do everything. It's a little convenient, but at the same time, I don't mind. I enjoyed the movie to pieces. But that's kind of one half a point I take off. Is it's a little contrived at the end with that stuff. But I still love it. I still love the whole, I'm not complaining at all, really, honestly. So.
Fair enough. All right, man. Well, guys, thank you guys for tuning in. This is going to be something I'm going to try to do a little bit more going forward, because again, the whole idea of the show is the then and now perspectives of three different generations. Yeah. Again, I want to do some really, really old movies that none of us have seen. And I think that'll be dope. We'll get that together at some point. But again, thank you guys for your support. We hope for your continued support, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace. I'm
Otis East, and I hate
everything.